Alright, CNT125 Remote Access Lab. We just got done configuring the routers with the IP addresses on the interfaces, routing protocol configuration, and then adding telnet configuration to this router and SSH access or configuration to this router. So now that we have that done, let's take a minute and look to make sure everything is up and functioning. We have green link lights everywhere, if you will. So I'm going to look at my physical, and I'm going to check to make sure I have link lights. I don't have the workstation configured yet, but that's okay. We're just making sure we have link lights everywhere. And I'm also going to double check, are these interfaces connected correctly? So I'll scroll back here to the map and make sure, okay, I have 00 going to the switch. I have 01 going over to this router. Let's double check. It should be going to 000, which it is. Good. And then I have 001 here going to this switch. Good. So I should have things cabled correctly. After I do that, scroll back down here. Right here. Here we go. Okay. I want to make sure everything is configured right. So on my router, do a show run. And we want to make sure next to the 00 interface, 192.168.100.1, that is correct. Double check it against the map, though, to be sure, and make sure subnet mask is correct. If it were wrong, all I would need to do is go back to this interface, reissue the IP address command with the correct IP, and that should overwrite and replace any errors that you have. I would do the same thing on the 01 port here. Make sure that is correct, IP and subnet mask. Again, if there's a typo, I should be able to just go back to this interface and reissue the IP address command, excuse me, and it'll overwrite what's there. If by chance I have these flip-flopped, I will need to do a no IP address on one to take the IP off before I try to move an IP address over. Okay, so I might need to, if I have these addresses flip-flopped in the wrong spots, I might need to do no IP address on one and then fix the other one and then put this IP back. Okay, I might need to do that. Just a little heads up. I'm looking at my routing protocol config, making sure all networks are there. Ooh, I just forgot to mention under the interface, I'm making sure I don't see the word shutdown. If I see the word shutdown, that means the port is turned off. I need to go back to that interface and issue the no shutdown command to turn that port on. I'm double checking my routing protocol, making sure all three networks are in there and they're correct. And then I'm just double checking that this guy has my telnet on, which it does. And you notice that virtual terminal 0 to 4 and 5 to 15, it gets split in half. Not a big deal. That's just what the code does. Okay, do not panic on that. I'm going to go to the Philadelphia and do the same thing. Show run. And double check my interfaces over here. Make sure that is correct. Make sure that is correct. Make sure all three networks are there, which they are. So now that I've double checked that I got blinky link lights everywhere and I've looked at my config, again, fixing anything that I might see along the way, I should now be able to look at the routing table and see all three networks in the routing table. So I'll open up my one of my routers here, my Harrisburg router. I'm going to do show IP route. In other words, show me the routing table. I'll make this a little larger, and I should see all three networks represented in the routing table, and I do. I see the 10, the 172, and the 192. Excellent. If I did not, go back and redo all these steps very carefully. It's either a cable on the wrong port, an IP address not configured or a port not turned on, or a network missing from your routing protocol config. It's one of those things. So you need to go back and double check your cable connections, make sure your interfaces are right, do the no shutdown, make sure all three networks are in the routing protocol config, and then give it a minute to update and then check this. Okay? So that's what I should be seeing at this point. Yay. When I do actually see all three networks in the routing table, now I will save my routing table for proof in the lab. Don't save it until you have all three networks in there in this lab. So I'm going to highlight this, And I'll just highlight the whole thing. Let's do right-click copy here. Copy. I'm going to open a notepad file, a new notepad file. And I'll give it a name of like 125 remote, oh my goodness, lab, and I'll just put my name here so I know. The first part is my routing table. So I'll put a little label there so I know. Paste that in, and let's give this guy a save. I'm going to put him into my 125 remote lab folder, and let's give him a name. Keep the TXT extension, 125 remote lab, and I'll put my last name here, Brown. You probably want to put your last name there. So now I have my file started for saving things like configurations and so forth. All right, make sure this is right. Make sure all three networks are in there before you go any further. And if they're not, go back, run through these steps again to make sure you're catching what it is that's causing the issue. All right, let's move on to setting up our clients. So we now want to set up our clients in the network. We have some IP addresses, subnet masks, and gateways we need to plug in. So I'm going to scroll up to my map for easy reference, and I will just go right across the board and configure all four, if you will. So desktop, IP config. We want this on static, 192.168.100.10. That subnet mask is good. 192.168.100.1 is the router we're attached to. Remember, gateway, follow this right up the line here, is the router we're attached to. This port right here. This router port we're attached to, Fast Ethernet 00. If I hold my pointer over the router and look at Fast Ethernet 00, I'll see it's 192.168.100.1. That is why I'm plugging that address into that PC. We do not have a DNS server this time, so we'll just leave him blank. While I'm here, I will do an IP config, and I'm actually going to, I'm double checking that, make sure it's all right. I'm going to ping 192.168.100.1, and I should get my router. Yay. I'm going to do the laptop here. 192.168.100.11. I do not want to conflict the other PC. So 11. Default C subnet mask is good. 192.168.100.1 is the router I'm attached to. That's the router port that I'm attached to. So it's that IP that I'm plugging in. I do not have a... Go back there. Here we go. I do not have a DNS server, so I'm just going to leave him blank. IP config. Double check, make sure all the numbers look right, which they do, and I will ping my gateway while I'm here. And I got successful. All right. If I did not get successful, let me do something like this here. If I did not get successful, one of the first things I'm going to do is look for typos in my command, which there are. I plugged in a number that's not being used. So first thing, double check, look for typos. All right, now I got successful. If I still didn't get successful, go back and check your IP address configuration. Make sure it's right. If it's still not getting anywhere, then you need to backtrack to, backtrack in your lab, to the troubleshooting where I had you walk through looking at all sections of your network. Okay? All right, let's do the Philadelphia side over here. These are 172.32.0.10. So, desktop IP config, 172.32.0.10. B subnet mask is fine. 172.32.0.1 is the interface I'm attached to. So follow this up to the router. I'm attached to the gigabit 001. Hold my pointer over the router. Actually, I'll close this out. Here we go. Hold my pointer over the router. And I look at the 001. I see 172.32.0.1. That is the port I'm attached to, so that is the gateway address that I will use. Alright, so after I applied that, IP config, make sure all that looks correct, and then I'm going to try to ping my gateway. Ping 172.32.0.1. And I'm getting the gateway. Good. I will now do the laptop while I'm here. (172.32.0.11). I do not want to conflict the other workstation. 172.32.0.1 is the router port I'm attached to. So I will do a command prompt ipconfig. 172.32.0.11, looking good. 172.32.0.1, that's my router interface, and we're getting successfuls. Good. Again, if any of that does not work, go back and double check your the IP address configuration on that device. Check that first, and then run through these steps here that I had you do to make sure your network is up and running. Double check all those. Don't assume, double check. Alright, so there is my client configuration, and I'm getting successfuls to my gateway. So now I'm going to try across the network from the Harrisburg to the Philadelphia side. I'm going to try across the network. So I can start with a ping here, and I can do 172.32.0.10. That's that workstation over there. So I get a successful ping. So I'm getting communication across the network, which is good. Now I'm going to do a trace route 172.32.0.10, and I should get the first router 100.1, second router 10.10.10.2, and then the workstation 172.32.0.10. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So we now have the network up and running, and we have our clients up and running. Again, if I do not get all three, I don't get all three hops, if you will, to get to my destination, check the workstation IP configuration, IP subnet mask gateway. Check this one, IP address subnet mask gateway. Then backtrack and work your way through all of these again. All of these right here, all these troubleshooting tips right there. Alrighty? Okay, so we have our clients up and working. When we come back in the next one, we'll start using our remote connections.